Mr. Balakrishnan, who kindly introduced me to the audience, Mr. Girish, and Mr. Santosh Kumar Mahapatra, and the distinguished assembled audience here. You know, one of the most devastating decisions, as somebody calls it, as one of the most unbelievable decisions, as someone will say, and one of the most cleansing decisions that someone else will say has been the demonetization decision taken by this government. You know, this is a subject which requires a very profound, calm, and unbiased discussion. But unfortunately, in our country, we decide everything in a particular context and see the effect of it as to what it does today in the front pages of newspapers, which will not give you a very clear picture as to what is this whole concept about. Unless we understand basically how it addresses a huge, accumulated, dangerous filth in the economy, and its statistical dimensions and its cascading effect, we will not be able to fathom the impact that this decision will have immediately, in the short run, and in future. This is a matter which requires very extensive study, and my humble submission is, as part of the media, I found the media has not very clearly focused on the issues. It has focused on the cues. Of course, it is true. Queue is there, problems are there, difficulties are there. So when the New Indian Express newspapers asked me how to give headlines for this, I suggested to them, you say it is financial Pokhran. You all know what Pokhran means. It is the atomic explosion. It is some kind of a financial explosion. And this has to be looked at from its economic rationale, the agenda against black money, bribery, and what is going to be its impact on the macroeconomics of India. You know, first thing we must all be concerned about, which is mentioned but not highlighted in the overall discourse, is its effect on fake money circulating in India. The extent of fake money circulating in India is not estimated, because Pakistan government has 150% of the printing capacity it needs for Pakistan. So you can understand it has enormous amount of exportable surplus of currency which it prints, the Indian currency. How many of you have come across this news item, I do not know, but I will read out to you. It's a very interesting news item in a very important paper called The Economic Times. Life has come to standstill in India's counterfeit capital. You know, in Malda district in West Bengal, the Indian currency is not the legal tender. It is the fake currency which is the legal tender. While people in the rest of the country are queuing up outside the banks for cash, there is an eerie calm in Kalia Chak in Malda district. Following the demonetization of 500 into 1,000 rupee notes, life has come virtually to standstill in India's counterfeit capital. And there the Indian currency is not to be seen. It is only the fake currency. Fake currency enters India through 4 routes, while Jammu and Punjab routes are now mostly under control. Kalia Chak via Nepal and Bangladesh border is the most preferred route. And 80% of the fake currency which comes into India comes through Malda district. And it moves to different parts of the country, which originating there. Apart from the geographical location, it is very close to a Bangladesh border, it is very close to the Nepal. Many people have misunderstood the role of fake currency. In fact, the former finance minister said, we have 14.5 lakh crores of 500,000 rupee notes circulating. This is just 400 crores. How many people know for the 26/11 blast in Bombay, how much money was spent by the Lashkar Taiba? Has anybody any idea here? We are all very well informed people. 164 people killed, 300 people maimed. The economic loss was estimated by the Asia Economic Study at 6.6 lakh crore, $120 billion. You know what was the amount that was actually spent? Fake currency, 25 lakh rupees. 25 lakh rupees can inflict such an amount of damage on the country. And we are saying just 400 crores out of 14.5 lakh crores. What is the big deal? Can you understand the shallowness of the debate in India? And this is immediately it will wipe out all the fake currency, and the result you see in Jammu and Kashmir. Immediately all the terror activity stopped because nobody was taking the fake 500 rupee notes and 1000 rupee notes and throwing stones at our army. And everybody began queuing up before the banks. And about 6% of all the money is deposited in India. Jammu and Kashmir Bank accounted 6% of all the money is deposited in India. It had a very salubrious and a very impactful effect on the terror funding in this country. So the kind of discourse that just 400 crores and you are spoiling the circulation of 14.5 lakh crores is based on illiteracy, and that it comes from a former finance minister who was also the home minister, who consequently took over on the 26/11 Bombay blast, is a very surprising kind of irresponsible statement which should have been avoided by any person in his position. Now, why was it done? And what was the driving factor? I will first take you to what is the amount of currency in circulation in relation to GDP. You know, after all, cash is a flow which drives the economy. But the economy is reflected in terms of the GDP growth. And in the year 1999, the currency with the public and the GDP, if you measure it as a ratio, 9.4% was the total currency with the people of the total GDP. That means to drive the GDP growth, you need 9.4% or 9 to 10% was the situation at that time. And between 1999 and 2004, you must understand how the economy moved. If you knew how the economy moved, with what kind of cash, and what is the impact, and what is the composition of that cash, and how the economy performed after 2004, and how the composition of the cash changed, and what was its impact on the overall economy, then you will get an idea as to why this was done, had to be done, couldn't be postponed, could have been done more comfortably sometime earlier. This will seal the debate. From 9.4% of the GDP, today, the cash with the people is 12%. This 12% has come actually when it should have reduced. With the banking opportunities, banking expansion, credit card expansion, debit card expansion, digital payment, actually this 9.4% must have come down to 8%. The ideal ratio would be somewhere around 7.5% to 8%. America is, in spite of all the digital and electronic and credit card and other payment, America is one of the most cash-driven economies. 7.5% of their GDP is in the form of actually printed cash. So instead of going down from 9.6% to about 7.5% or 8%, actually the cash with the public went up. It is not only it went up like that, the proportion of 500 rupee note and 1000 rupee notes, which was about 34% of the total cash with the public, went up to in 2004. Now mark this date, which is important. In 2004, the proportion of 500 rupee note and 1000 rupee notes was 34% of the total cash with the public, which has now gone up to 87% in this period. And I want you to mark the date 1999, 2004, 2012 and now. And I will give you the picture as to how the economy has moved in this period. Between 1999 and 2004, what happened to the Indian economy? Our GDP grew by 5.5%. It's supposed to be not a very high growth. It's not supposed to be a very low growth. It is supposed to be a medium growth. 5.5% to 6% is a medium growth. 7 to 8% is high growth. 8% and beyond is a overheated growth. Many of us know this. So 5.5% was the growth in GDP in this 5-year period. Inflation grew at 4.6%, which is less than the target at 5%. So it's a good control over inflation. And the current account of India, which is India's external account, which was from 1950 to 76, was running in deficit. In 76, 77, 77, 78, we had a small surplus. Then from 77, 78 to 2001, 2002, we had only deficit. In 2002, 2003, 2003, 2004, we had a current account surplus of $20.5 billion. We didn't have much of foreign investment. We were not an export-driven economy. But we generated this surplus how? In that 5-year period, we had a net external surplus of $17 billion. Mark this, that in 2003, $6 billion, 2003-04, $14 billion was the external surplus. That is why the world looked at India, that without high foreign investment, without very highly export-oriented growth, India has been able to generate an exportable surplus which put it along with some of the important countries. That is how India was seen as a rising economic power. It is not because of GDP. It was because of our external surplus. So in terms of GDP growth, in terms of inflation, in terms of capital account surplus, external surplus, there was a real positive impact on the economy. You know what was the amount of jobs generated in this period? 60 million jobs in 5 years. In this 5-year period, we generated 60 million jobs. This is on the one side. On the other side, look at the stock market. The growth of 5.5% in terms of the growth of GDP on current rates, not that the base rates. At the market rates, it is 30%. 31% was the growth in terms of GDP in this 5-year period. So in terms of market values, current prices, the GDP grew by 31%. Now you compare with what is the price of capital assets. Stock market grew by 32%. And gold prices rose up by 38%. Property prices grew by 30%. You can see all the asset prices moved in line with the GDP. So housing affordability was there. And gold did not reach beyond one's control. So this is the record in the 5-year period between 1999 and 2004. And now see what happens after 2004. After 2004, the GDP rises. The GDP at the inflation determined rates was 8.4%, which is a very high rate of growth for India. This was regarded as the high growth mode of the Indian economy. In terms of at market rates, the GDP grew by 50%. So, very high growth rate. Then, inflation grew up 6.5%. From 4.5%, the inflation went up to 6.5%. Current account from a surplus of $17 billion between 2004 and 2010 in 6 years, the current account deficit was $100 billion. This completely reversed the whole situation in 2004. And you know what is the employment generated in this period of high growth? 8.4% growth? Just 27 lakhs. 2.7 million only. This entire growth was jobless growth. We grew, but we did not produce jobs. How did the growth take place then? I will explain to you the figures and relate to you how it was driven only by the unmonitored cash which was circulating in the economy. Gold prices went up by 316% in this 6-year period. Stock prices went up by 311%. Property prices doubled every 2 years or 3 years. And in Gurgaon and Ghaziabad, the property prices went up by 10 times to 20 times. This accounted for the rise in the 500 rupee notes and 1000 rupee notes in circulation. And the asset prices were driven by black money. And when asset prices are driven, when the asset prices are realized into cash, that income adds to GDP. And this also promotes consumption of a high order. The malls come up, their sales go up. That has nothing to do with production. With the result you saw in this period, what is known as asset inflation driven, wealthy effect driven growth, which had nothing to do with employment or inflation. This is what brought about the crisis in the year 2008. Between 2001 and 2008, all over the world, it is the asset prices driven wealthy effect that produced growth without employment, and that resulted in a huge crash. This asset price inflation is continuing even today. Though it has moderated in the real estate sector, stock sector has not moderated, and gold has not moderated, and there is a triangular relationship between quadrangular relationship between gold, stocks, real estate and cash. And the Reserve Bank had estimated that 2/3 of the 1000 rupee notes which go into the market doesn't come into the banking system. 1/3 of the 500 rupee notes which goes out of the banking system doesn't come into the banking system. That means it is operating outside the banking system. And it is finding refuge in these assets which have shown a huge growth in value. Imagine in between 1999 and 2004, the asset price movement were in tune with the GDP growth. Not very much variation. GDP grew by 31%, stocks grew by 32%, gold prices grew by 38%, and in fact, the property values grew at less rates than the GDP itself, affordability of the house. But it is completely the reverse here. The GDP growth itself is attributable to the rise in asset prices. And so there is two kinds of financialization of the Indian economy. In the Western countries, it does through the banking system itself. Because the banking system itself promotes this. You must have known in America, the housing values rise made the people borrow money against what is known as home equity. For example, I bought a house at $500,000 and it becomes $1 million. The rise in the value of the house becomes like equity against which the bank will lend money. So that was an official financialization. Here what it took place was unofficial financialization. With the result, the growth took a path which is completely against the interests of India. The growth is not rooted in the people or employment. It was not driving the sectors which produce employment. For example, take what the economic census says in the year 2014-15, third economic census. Said there are 58 million non-farming enterprises which produce 128 million employment, and this is the only employment producing sector of India. Only 4% of the bank money goes into it. Balance 96% it borrows in the open market at 60% interest, 90% interest, 120% interest, at usurious rates of interest. And the bank is not lending money because bank doesn't have money. You know, the latest figures of bank deposits is 96 lakh crores is the bank deposits. The total currency in circulation is 17 lakh crores. But the bank deposits are 96 lakh crores. You know, how does it happen? How is it happening? Out of that, you all know, according to the Reserve Bank, 2/3 of the 1,000 rupee notes and 1/3 of the 500 rupee notes do not go into the banking system at all. That means 6 lakh crores is outside the banking system. Only 11 lakh crores goes into the banking system and comes out. And that has produced 96 lakh crores of deposits. Those who are familiar with banking and economics will know this is the trick of the banks producing money through what is known as the fractional reserve system. When you put 1,000 rupees in a bank, the bank has to keep 4.5% cash reserve, and the balance it is able to invest and it is able to lend. And the balance money also comes into the banking system, and out of the balance money it again keeps a reserve of 4.5% and then lends. Like this, the bank is able to generate money, and much of the money that we are seeing in circulation is bank generated money.